Dulcie May Markham was born in the inner-city Sydney suburb of Surrey Hills on the 27th of February 1914. Markham was variously known in the media as the Angel of Death, the Black Widow, Pretty Dulcie, Australia's Most Beautiful Bad Woman, Bad Luck Doll, and the One-Way Ticket. You see, of Markham's lovers, 5 were shot dead whilst 2 were stabbed. The former Sydney newspaper, the Daily Mirror, summed up her career in crime as Dulcie Markham saw more violence and death than any other woman in Australia's history. Markham had become a prostitute when she was just 15 years old, and Sydney's most extravagant gangster companion by the time she was 18. She was attracted to and associated with many major criminals of the era. She was known as Sydney's most expensive prostitute, reportedly costing £2, a sum that was around half the weekly wage for a man at the time. In today's terms, her services would cost in the range of $600. During her criminal career, she had amassed more than 100 convictions in New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, and Western Australia for a wide range of offences, including prostitution, vagrancy, consorting, assaulting police and the public, keeping a brothel, drunkenness, and drunk driving. She was sent to prison on numerous occasions. But perhaps most intriguing were her romantic liaisons and their results. On 13 May 1931, in William Street, Sydney, storekeeper Alfred Dillon and 21-year-old gunman Cecil Scotty McCormack came to blows over the attentions of Markham, and in the resultant melee, Dillon stabbed McCormack to death. Markham was there. Although she and McCormack were planning to marry, she was also seeing Dillon at the time. Her first marriage was to a sideshow worker and small-time mobster Frank Bowen in Brisbane in March 1936. Later in 1936, Markham was involved with Guido Coletti, a notorious Sydney gunman and the then husband of Nellie Cameron, another prominent Sydney sex worker of the period. By December 1937, Markham had shifted to Melbourne and now had gunman Arthur Taplin as her pimp and lover. But Taplin was subsequently shot dead later that year. In August 1939, Markham attended a party at Woolloomooloo in Sydney with Coletti, where he was shot dead. By mid-1940, the 24-year-old, prettiest and most notorious woman in Australia's underworld was romantically involved with 26-year-old Fred Paddles Anderson. She intended to marry Anderson once she divorced Bowen. Later that year, Bowen was shot and killed in King's Cross, Sydney. In 1943, Markham had relocated to Queensland's Gold Coast to take advantage of the influx of American soldiers, and was living with her then de facto husband, James Williams. Williams was a taxi driver who was also involved in illegal grog running. By September 1945, Markham was back in Melbourne when her then boyfriend and leading Melbourne criminal Leslie Walkerden was shot dead in Richmond. In September 1951, Markham was shot in the hip at a party at St Kilda. Her then boyfriend and ex-boxer Gavin Thomas Welsh was shot and killed at the same party. In December 1951, while still recovering from the shooting, she married Leonard Redder Lewis, who was later shot in April 1952. He survived the shooting, but the couple never lived together again and later divorced. She had moved to Sydney's suburb of Bondi by the 1950s. In 1955, a male visitor threw Markham from the top of a Bondi block of flats. Although her boyfriends and husbands often met with sudden violent death or inflicted violence upon her, it was third time lucky for Markham. In 1972, she married her third husband, Martin Rooney, a sailor, and they lived quietly and happily together in Moore Street, Bondi. But unfortunately, tragedy struck again just 4 years later. Markham died of asphyxiation when her bedroom caught on fire. It appeared she had fallen asleep while smoking. Her husband told the media, "I loved the woman. She was a wonderful housewife and we both wanted to forget the past. She was Mrs. Rooney, not Dulcie Markham, and that's how she'll be buried." Dulcie May Markham had outlived most of her criminal contemporaries from Sydney's tempestuous razor gang era. The feared Sydney policeman and detective Frank Bumper Farrell once told a judge that Markham was past redemption, yet he gave the eulogy at her funeral. She was cremated in Eastern Suburbs Memorial Park, and finally, after a life of crime and passion, Dulcie Markham was laid to rest.